I've been mixing 5.1 along with my stereo mixes for over 20 years, from when 5.1 started a long time ago. And so last year, I was asked to mix the fourth album by a group called The Band, who were big in the 60s, for their 50th year anniversary. I had mixed their previous three in 5.1 and stereo. And so they said, oh, for this one, could you do an Atmos mix? And I went, oh, I looked around the studio and, Atmos, I'm sure there's a way I could do that. And so I hung up the phone and immediately started trying to figure out how I was going to do it. Luckily, we had just, because the studio's right under the living room, we had just changed the floors in the living room. And so I was thinking a bit ahead a couple of years ago, and we ran conduits for speaker wires for the overhead speakers, and or what they call the height speakers. And so that I was already partway there. I just had to get speakers. I had to get more. I went from a 5.1 to a 7.1 system, and just two more of the Dynaudios that I already had, actually. So that wasn't too bad. But then I had to figure out a monitor controller. And so I was recommended to use this thing called a Grace something 908 something or other, which is very expensive. And I got it, and we wired everything up with Dante, which is incredibly complicated. Luckily, my assistant Brandon Duncan was with me, and he figured out how to do it, because I would have been it would have been over my head. Anyway, so we got that working, and then I was informed by my wife that she was like, well, why aren't you using the Symphony Mark II, which I already was using for my print rig? Why aren't you using that for your system? Well, it turns out that I can't do Dante and Thunderbolt at the same time, but I could just switch the whole thing to Thunderbolt and not use the Dante at all. And so that eliminated the Grace, which I sent back. The wonderful people at Sweetwater, who are fantastic, I love these guys, they actually took it back and gave me a pretty good credit on it, which was nice. And I wired up which turned out to be really simple, to wire up the Symphony. And then we started working on, we said, okay, there's a few things. This can do the 5.1, it can do the Atmos monitoring. It can control 12 speakers pretty easily. But I'd like it to do a few more things, so that, because I mix the Atmos and stereo at the same time off my analog desk. I figured out how to do that years ago. And I want to be able to switch easily between the two. And so we've upgraded the software now, so I can do that. I can select 3 sets of speakers. It's all controlled from this little Apogee remote control. This is called the Symphony Remote control. There's a bunch of buttons on there. I have a bunch of workflows. So the buttons on the bottom are, this is my stereo workflow, which actually is a return from these switches here. So I can plug any number of different sources into that, like the rough mix, the Dolby binaural, the straight off the stereo mix from the Pro Tools, and then that feeds into here, and then 3 different speakers, and then the fourth is a dim button, and then B is Atmos, and that immediately just goes to the first speaker set. It will only go to that because I only have 1 set of Atmos speakers. And then C is if I want to bypass all these switches on the console altogether, in case the console's shut down. I shut the console down on weekends to save electricity. So that way I can play anything I want without firing up the desk. And then D is actually I just set that up recently, which is very simple, because I've been upgrading a bunch of 5.1 mixes to Atmos. And so that way I can listen to the 5.1 and I can A/B it, the 5.1 mix that I had already printed, to the new Atmos version. And so it's really convenient. It's so easy in the software to be able to mess around with that.